My name is Harper, and I'm 32 years old. Right now, I'm standing in the corner of an extravagant bridal suite, watching my younger sister Sloane twirl in front of a floor-to-ceiling mirror wearing a dress that costs more than my car. The room smells like champagne and gardenias, and my mother Judith is fluttering around Sloane like she's royalty, adjusting the lace train and gushing about how perfect everything is going to be. Nobody's looking at me. Nobody ever does anymore. I'm just the older sister, the cautionary tale, the one who somehow failed to launch despite doing everything right for 29 years. Then my mother turns, her eyes landing on me with that familiar mixture of pity and disappointment, and asks the question I've been dreading all afternoon. "When's your turn, Harper?" she says, her voice dripping with false sweetness. The room goes quiet. Sloane stops spinning. I feel something inside me crack open after 3 years of holding it together, and before I can stop myself, the words tumble out. "It already happened, Mom, 3 years ago." The silence that follows is deafening. Before we dive deeper into what happened next, I want to ask you something. Where are you watching this from? Drop your city or country in the comments below because I love knowing where my viewers are tuning in from around the world. And if you're new here, please hit that like button and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss what comes next in this story. Trust me, you're going to want to hear how a secret marriage, a family betrayal, and a sister's ambition tore my life apart and taught me the hardest lesson about loyalty and self-worth. Now, let me take you back to where it all began. 3 years ago, I was 29 and working at the architecture firm my father Malcolm built from the ground up over 30 years. I'd graduated top of my class from design school, spent 5 years proving myself in every department, and everyone assumed I'd eventually take over as managing partner when my father retired. I loved the work. Loved the creativity of designing spaces that would become part of people's lives for decades. That's where I met Garrett. He was 34 when the firm hired him, a talented architect from Portland with an impressive portfolio and a quiet confidence that immediately set him apart from the other competitive personalities in the office. We were assigned to the same project, a sustainable housing development on the waterfront, and I remember being struck by how differently he approached design. While everyone else was focused on winning awards and impressing clients, Garrett genuinely cared about creating something meaningful. We'd stay late reviewing plans, debating the merits of passive solar orientation versus construction costs. And somewhere between the blueprint revisions and the coffee runs, I fell completely in love with him. We kept our relationship secret for 6 months because the firm had strict policies against workplace romances, especially involving family members of the ownership. We'd meet at his apartment after work, spend weekends hiking outside the city where nobody would recognize us, and talk about everything except the impossible situation we were creating. Garrett understood the pressure I was under. He never pushed me to go public or make demands about our future. He just loved me in this uncomplicated, steady way that felt like coming home after a lifetime of performing for an audience. When he proposed during a work trip to Seattle, standing on a rain-soaked pier with the city lights reflecting off the water, he didn't have elaborate speech prepared. He just held my hand and said, "I want to build a life with you, Harper, a real one. Will you marry me?" I said yes without hesitation, and 2 weeks later we stood in front of a courthouse judge with 2 strangers as witnesses and became husband and wife. It was simple and perfect and completely ours. The plan was to tell my family after we finished the waterfront project, after things settled down at work, after I found the right moment. But there never seemed to be a right moment. My mother had been pushing me toward Braden, the son of my father's biggest business partner, for years. She'd arrange coincidental meetings, drop hints about what a good match we'd make, and talk endlessly about the merger potential between our families. I knew she'd be furious about Garrett. I knew my father would see it as a betrayal of company policy and family expectations. So, I delayed and made excuses and lived this strange double life where I was Mrs. Garrett Shaw in private and Harper Whitmore, the dedicated career woman, in public. Garrett was patient, but I could see it wearing on him. The secrecy felt like shame even though I wasn't ashamed. I was just scared of losing everything I'd worked for, scared of disappointing parents who'd already planned out my entire future, scared of not being strong enough to choose my own happiness over their approval. For 4 months, we managed to keep our secret intact. I wore my wedding ring on a chain under my blouse during work hours. We maintained professional distance in the office and saved our real selves for the stolen hours at home. Garrett's apartment became our sanctuary, the only place where I could breathe freely and be completely honest. We'd cook dinner together, watch old movies, and talk about the future we'd have once everything was out in the open. He wanted kids eventually, maybe 2. I wanted to travel more, see all the architectural wonders I'd only studied in books. We made plans and dreamed dreams and built this fragile bubble of happiness that I somehow convinced myself could last forever. I should have known better. In my family, secrets never stayed buried for long, and the person who'd eventually dig mine up was the last one I ever expected to betray me. My sister Sloane found my wedding ring on a Tuesday afternoon. I'd been at her apartment helping her move furniture, because that's what big sisters do, and I'd taken off my necklace while we wrestled a bookshelf through a narrow doorway. I forgot to put it back on before throwing my jacket on her couch, and when I came out of the bathroom, she was sitting there holding the delicate chain with my ring dangling from her fingers. Her eyes were wide with what I mistook for excitement. "Harper, is this what I think it is?" she asked. And the way she said it made me feel like maybe, just maybe, I could trust her with the truth. She was my baby sister, the person I'd protected from bullies in middle school and coached through her first heartbreak. We'd shared secrets our whole lives. So I sat down next to her and told her everything. About Garrett, about the courthouse wedding, about how scared I was to tell Mom and Dad. Sloane hugged me and said all the right things. She promised she wouldn't tell anyone, said she was happy for me, even offered to help me figure out the best way to break the news to our parents. I left her apartment that day feeling lighter than I had in months, grateful to finally have an ally in the family. 2 weeks later, I walked into Sunday dinner at my parents' house and immediately knew something was wrong. The dining room felt like a courtroom, with my father sitting at the head of the table wearing his sternest boardroom expression and my mother positioned across from him with her arms crossed and her mouth pressed into a thin line of disapproval. Sloane was already seated, staring intently at her plate and refusing to meet my eyes. Braden was there too, which was unusual for a family dinner, looking uncomfortable in a suit that seemed too formal for the occasion. My father didn't waste time on pleasantries. "Sit down, Harper. We need to discuss your secret marriage." The words hit me like a physical blow. I looked at Sloane, waiting for her to say something, to explain, to defend me. She just kept staring at her plate, her face flushed but her expression carefully neutral. My mother launched into an immediate attack, her voice rising with each sentence about how I'd humiliated the family, how I'd thrown away my future on some nobody employee, how I'd betrayed their trust and made a mockery of everything they'd built. My father's disappointment was somehow worse than my mother's anger. He spoke quietly, methodically, laying out all the ways I'd violated company policy and damaged my professional reputation. He talked about Garrett like he was a con artist, someone who'd manipulated me for status and access to family money. When I tried to defend Garrett, tried to explain that we loved each other and that this wasn't some impulsive mistake, my mother cut me off. "Love? You don't know what love is, Harper. You know what this is? This is rebellion. This is you trying to prove something by making the worst possible choice. Braden sat there through the whole thing, occasionally shooting me these looks that I couldn't quite interpret. Pity? Disappointment? Possessiveness? I couldn't tell, and I was too overwhelmed to care. The worst part was watching Sloane pretend to be surprised, acting like this was all news to her, even adding little comments about how shocked she was that I'd done something so reckless. When I finally escaped to my car 2 hours later, shaking and crying so hard I could barely see to drive, I realized that my sister hadn't just broken my confidence. She'd actively participated in my ambush, and she'd done it while looking me in the eye and lying about her role in the whole thing. The betrayal from Sloane cut deeper than anything my parents said. I'd spent my whole childhood protecting her, standing up for her, celebrating her successes even when they came at my expense. When she'd struggled in school, I'd tutored her. When she'd been heartbroken over her high school boyfriend, I'd stayed up all night talking her through it. I'd championed her career ambitions, and recommended her for the marketing position at Dad's firm even though she was barely qualified. And this was how she repaid that loyalty. By taking the most vulnerable secret I'd ever shared, and weaponizing it for her own benefit. I called her that night, my voice hoarse from crying, and asked her directly if she'd told them. She had the audacity to sound offended by the question. "Harper, I would never betray you like that. Maybe Mom found out some other way. Maybe someone saw you two together. But I knew it in my bones, the way you know when someone you love is lying to your face. The way she'd avoided my eyes at dinner, the way she'd played her role just a little too perfectly, the way Mom had known details I'd only told Sloane. My sister had sold me out, and she didn't even have the courage to admit it." The morning after the disastrous family dinner, my father called me into his office before the regular Monday staff meeting. His corner office overlooked the city, floor-to-ceiling windows framing the skyline we'd helped shape with our designs, and I'd always felt proud walking into that space. That morning, it felt like a trap. Malcolm didn't invite me to sit. He stood behind his massive desk, with his hands clasped behind his back, and delivered an ultimatum in the same tone he used to fire underperforming employees. "You have two choices, Harper. Divorce Garrett and forget this embarrassing chapter ever happened. Or refuse. And you'll be removed from the company and written out of the family will. You have 1 week to decide." I stared at him. This man had taught me to ride a bike and helped me build architectural models for school projects, and realized he was completely serious. When I told him I wouldn't divorce Garrett, that I loved him and we were building a life together, my father's expression didn't change. He just nodded once and said, "Then you've made your choice. Don't expect this to be easy." He wasn't exaggerating. What followed was a systematic campaign to destroy Garrett's career and our marriage, executed with the kind of cold precision my father usually reserved for hostile corporate takeovers. First, they transferred me to a different department, separating me from Garrett during work hours and assigning me to projects that required extensive travel. Then they started giving Garrett impossible assignments with unrealistic deadlines, and difficult clients had been prepped to be dissatisfied with anything he produced. I watched helplessly as my husband worked 16-hour days trying to meet standards that kept shifting, trying to please clients who'd already decided to hate his work before he even presented it. The stress started showing on his face, in the tension in his shoulders, in the way he'd come home exhausted and defeated night after night. My colleagues, people I'd worked with for years, began treating Garrett differently. Conversations would stop when he entered a room. He'd be excluded from team lunches and after-work drinks. Someone started a whisper campaign about his qualifications, questioning whether he'd actually designed the Portland projects in his portfolio or just taken credit for other people's work. My mother escalated her own offensive on the home front. She'd call me 3 or 4 times a week, sometimes more, always with the same script about how Garrett was using me, how he'd never amount to anything, How I was throwing away my future for someone who'd drag me down to his level. She'd show up at our apartment unannounced, insisting we needed to talk privately, and then spend an hour trying to convince me that divorce was the only rational option. "You're still young enough to recover from this mistake," she'd say, as if my marriage was a car accident I needed to heal from, rather than a choice I'd made with a clear mind and full heart. She'd arrange for Braden to be at family events, at the country club, at charity fundraisers she knew I'd attend, creating these awkward encounters where he'd express his disappointment and make it clear he'd be willing to overlook my lapse in judgment if I came to my senses. The psychological warfare was relentless and exhausting, and I could feel it taking a toll on both Garrett and me. The anonymous emails started about 6 months into the campaign. Someone was sending detailed complaints to the company's ethics board about Garrett's conduct, alleging everything from plagiarism to inappropriate client relationships to timecard fraud. Every allegation was investigated and dismissed as baseless, but the investigations themselves were damaging. Garrett would be called into HR meetings, questioned about his work, put on the defensive over and over again. I knew my father was behind it, or at least knew who was behind it and was allowing it to continue, but I couldn't prove anything. The emails were sent from dummy accounts. The complaints were always just vague enough to require investigation, but specific enough to seem credible, and the whole thing was designed to slowly destroy Garrett's reputation and his spirit. I tried to fight back, tried to defend him in meetings and push back against the unfair treatment, but that only made things worse. My father pulled me aside and made it clear that any attempt to protect Garrett would be seen as proof that I was part of whatever misconduct he was being accused of. I was trapped, watching the man I loved being systematically broken down, while my family smiled and pretended everything was normal. The toll on our marriage was inevitable. We'd come home from work and be too exhausted to do anything but collapse on the couch. The easy conversations we used to have dried up, replaced by tense discussions about money and stress, and whether we could survive this. Garrett never blamed me, never said it was my fault, but I could see him withdrawing into himself. He'd stay late at work not because he was behind on projects, but because coming home meant facing the reality of what my family was doing to us. I'd lie awake at night next to him, listening to him breathe and wondering how long we could keep this up. My mother's voice would echo in my head during those sleepless hours, insisting that this was what I'd chosen, that this suffering was the price of my defiance. Sometimes I'd catch myself wondering if she was right, if maybe the smart thing would be to give up and go back to the life they'd planned for me. Then Garrett would reach for my hand in his sleep, and I'd remember why I was fighting. But remembering why wasn't always enough to keep fighting, especially when the people with all the power were determined to make us lose. The end came on a Wednesday morning 14 months after my family found out about the marriage. I was in a client meeting when my father's assistant called and said I needed to come to the executive conference room immediately. The way she said it made my stomach drop. I excused myself and practically ran down the hallway, my mind racing through possibilities, none of them good. When I walked in, my father was standing at the head of the conference table with 3 board members and the head of HR. Garrett was sitting alone on the opposite side, his face pale and his hands clenched on the table in front of him. My father didn't acknowledge me beyond a brief glance. He opened a folder and began reading from what he called a formal investigation report, his voice flat and professional as he detailed allegations that Garrett had stolen proprietary design files from the company server and attempted to sell them to a competitor. He pulled out printed documents, supposedly evidence, showing file transfers from the company network to Garrett's personal laptop with timestamps and metadata that made it look damning and deliberate. Garrett's voice was steady but strained when he responded. "Those are my original drafts. I created those designs. I always work on my personal laptop and then transfer files to the company's server. You know that's standard practice. But my father was ready for that defense. Had brought in the IT director who explained in technical terms I barely understood that the metadata showed the files had originated on the company's server and been copied to Garrett's laptop, not the other way around. Someone had clearly manipulated the evidence, reversed the actual sequence of events to make Garrett look like a thief, and done it well enough that even our own IT department was convinced. I tried to interrupt, tried to point out the inconsistencies and demand a more thorough investigation, but my father cut me off with a look that could freeze blood. Harper, unless you have direct evidence contradicting these findings, I suggest you remain silent, unless you want to implicate yourself as an accomplice. The threat was clear, and I was paralyzed by the realization that anything I said would only make things worse for both of us. The board voted unanimously to terminate Garrett's employment effective immediately. Security was called to escort him out of the building, and I had to watch my husband walk past me with a box containing 3 years of work and memories while everyone in the office stared and whispered. I couldn't even hug him or walk out with him without confirming everyone's suspicions that I'd been helping him steal company secrets. I just stood there like a coward while the man I loved was publicly humiliated and his professional reputation was destroyed. The worst part was knowing that my father had orchestrated the whole thing, that had manufactured evidence and corrupted an investigation just to drive Garrett away from me. After Garrett left, my father pulled me into his office and closed the door. His voice was almost gentle when he spoke, like he was trying to comfort a child after a necessary punishment. This is for your own good, Harper. That man was dragging you down. Now you can move forward with your life and your career. All you have to do is file for divorce and this whole unpleasant situation can be behind us. Word spread fast in the architecture community. By the end of the week, every firm in the city had heard some version of the story about Garrett Shaw, the architect who had been fired for theft and corporate espionage. His name was mud, his reputation unsalvageable, and nobody would touch him for employment. He sent out dozens of applications and got exactly 0 interviews. The few contacts who returned his calls were polite but firm in their rejections, citing concerns about his judgment and professional ethics. We were living entirely on my salary now, and even that felt precarious because I knew my father could fire me any time he wanted. I'd considered quitting in solidarity, but Garrett begged me not to. We needed the income, needed the health insurance, needed some kind of stability while he figured out his next move. So I stayed, walking into that office every day and pretending everything was fine, while my family celebrated their victory and poor Garrett sat at home, sending applications into the void and slowly losing himself to depression and anger. The strain on our marriage became unbearable. We'd argue about small things, stupid things, because we couldn't argue about the real problem, which was that my family had destroyed his career and there was nothing either of us could do about it. Money got tight, then tighter. We had to move to a cheaper apartment, sell Garrett's car, cut back on everything that wasn't absolutely essential. My mother called constantly, her voice saccharine sweet as she asked how we were managing and whether I'd reconsidered her suggestion about divorce. She knew exactly what she was doing, rubbing salt in the wound and waiting for me to break. Some nights I'd find Garrett just sitting in the dark, staring at nothing, and I didn't know how to reach him anymore. The man who'd been so confident and passionate about his work was disappearing, replaced by someone angry and defeated and distant. We were drowning, and the people who were supposed to love me were holding our heads underwater, while asking when I'd be ready to come up for air alone. While my life was falling apart, Sloane's career was mysteriously thriving. 6 months after Garrett's firing, my sister was promoted to senior marketing manager, a position that typically required at least 8 years of experience and a proven track record of successful campaigns. Sloane had been with the company for barely 3 years and had accomplished nothing particularly noteworthy, but suddenly she was being fast-tracked up the corporate ladder with my father's enthusiastic support. I didn't connect the dots immediately because I was too consumed with trying to keep my own life together, but when I saw the announcement on the company intranet, something clicked. The senior marketing manager position had been promised to me 2 years earlier as part of my leadership development plan. It was supposed to be my stepping stone to eventually taking over a larger role in the company. Now it was Sloane's, and the timing was too convenient to be coincidental. I confronted her in the break room on her second day in the new role, keeping my voice low so the administrative assistants at the nearby desks wouldn't overhear. That was supposed to be my position, I said, and Sloane had the audacity to look surprised. She set down her coffee and met my eyes with an expression I'd never seen on her face before, something cold and calculating that didn't belong on my baby sister. You made your choice, Harper. You chose Garrett over your career. I'm just taking advantage of the opportunities you threw away. The words were delivered without malice, which somehow made them worse. This wasn't even revenge or jealousy speaking. This was pragmatic ambition. Sloane simply stepping into the space it vacated, and feeling completely justified in doing so. I pressed her about telling Mom and Dad about my marriage, about whether she'd done it deliberately to sabotage me, and she didn't even bother denying it. I was tired of living in your shadow, she said, her voice matter of fact. Perfect Harper, the golden daughter who could do no wrong. Dad's favorite. Mom's pride and joy. Do you know what it's like growing up behind someone like you? I finally had a chance to step out of that shadow, and yes, I took it. I'd do it again. The confession hit me like a slap. This wasn't an accident or a momentary lapse in judgment. Sloane had deliberately betrayed me, had seen my vulnerability as an opportunity for her own advancement, and felt absolutely no remorse about it. When I asked her how she could do that to her own sister, she actually laughed. You want to know the really funny part? Mom and Dad promised me your position if I helped them fix your mistake. They needed someone to tell them about Garrett, so they could intervene before you completely ruined your future. I gave them that information, and they kept their promise. That's how the world works, Harper. Loyalty is rewarded. I left that conversation feeling like I'd been talking to a stranger, someone who happened to share my childhood memories and my parents' genes but who was fundamentally not the person I thought I knew. Sloane had orchestrated my downfall from the beginning, had played the role of supportive sister while actively working to destroy my marriage and steal my career, and she saw absolutely nothing wrong with what she'd done. In her mind, this was just business, just natural competition, just her finally getting what she deserved. I went home that night and told Garrett everything, and for the first time in months, I saw something besides defeat in his eyes. It was anger, righteous and burning, at the people who'd systematically destroyed both of our lives. We only have each other now, he said, pulling me close. Maybe that should be enough. Maybe we don't need them. But even as he said it, I could hear the doubt in his voice. Was it enough? Could love actually survive this level of sustained assault from people with money and power, and no moral boundaries? I wanted to believe it could. Wanted to believe we were strong enough to weather this together. But I was so tired. Tired of fighting. Tired of being the villain in my own family. Tired of watching Garrett suffer because he'd made the mistake of falling in love with me. My mother's campaign of psychological warfare intensified after Sloane's promotion. She'd text me articles about the importance of family, about daughters who'd reconciled with their parents after making poor choices, about the statistical failure rates of marriages that didn't have family support. She'd leave voicemails that started sympathetic and ended accusatory, asking how long I planned to let pride destroy my future and Garrett's dignity. Then Braden started showing up at places I frequented, the coffee shop near our apartment, the gym where I'd swim laps to clear my head, the bookstore I'd escape to on Saturday afternoons. He'd act like these meetings were coincidental, would make small talk and express concern about how stressed I looked and offer help in vague terms that always circled back to the same point. If I left Garrett, if I came back to the family, if I made the right choice, everything could go back to normal. He'd forgiven me, he said, for the confusion and the mistake. He still thought we could have the partnership everyone had always envisioned. The encounters felt like stalking, but I couldn't prove they weren't random. Couldn't make him stop without causing a scene that would only give my parents more ammunition. I felt trapped in a nightmare where every direction I turned led to more pressure, more manipulation, more people insisting that the solution to all my problems was abandoning the one person who actually loved me for who I was rather than who they wanted me to be. 15 months after Garrett lost his job, he finally found work at a small firm 3 hours away that either hadn't heard the rumors or had decided to give him a chance despite them. The salary was half what he'd been making before, the projects were residential renovations rather than major developments, and he'd have to stay in extended stay hotels during the week and only come home on weekends. But it was work, it was architecture, it was a chance to start rebuilding his career away from my father's influence. I was happy for him and devastated for us at the same time. The distance and the stress and the financial pressure were crushing what was left of our connection. We'd gone from being best friends who couldn't wait to see each other, to two exhausted people who mostly communicated through texts about bills and schedules. The weekends when Garrett came home were strained, filled with silence and careful conversations that avoided all the real issues because we were both too tired to fight anymore. I'd catch him staring at me sometimes with this look of sadness and resignation, like he was mourning something that wasn't quite dead yet but was definitely dying. My mother chose that moment of maximum vulnerability to make her final push. She invited me to lunch at the country club, just the two of us, and spent the first 30 minutes being uncharacteristically kind and understanding. She acknowledged that the past year had been difficult, said she understood why I'd felt the need to rebel against their plans for my life, even admitted that maybe she and Dad had been too harsh in their response. I wanted so badly to believe that she was actually seeing me, actually trying to bridge the gap between us, that I let my guard down. Then she laid out her real agenda with devastating clarity. If you don't end this marriage, Harper, I'll make sure Garrett never works in this state again. Your father has connections at every major firm within 500 miles. One phone call, and that little job he just got, gone. And the next one after that, and the one after that. We can make his life impossible for as long as you insist on this fantasy. The threat was delivered in the same pleasant tone she'd been using to discuss the weather and the country club's new menu, and that disconnect between her words and her delivery made it somehow more terrifying. She wasn't bluffing. I could see in her eyes that she meant every word, that she would absolutely destroy whatever small chance Garrett had at rebuilding his career if I didn't comply. When I got home that night, I couldn't stop shaking. Garrett found me sitting on the floor of our bedroom closet, crying so hard I couldn't breathe, and he knew without asking what had happened. He held me until I could talk, and then I told him everything my mother had said. His face went through several emotions in quick succession: anger, despair, resignation, and finally something that looked almost like relief. "We can't keep doing this," he said quietly. "Harper, I love you. I will always love you, but I can't watch you destroy yourself trying to hold on to something your family will never let us have. This isn't sustainable. We're not surviving this, we're just prolonging the inevitable." I tried to argue, tried to insist we could figure something out, but even as I said the words, I knew he was right. We'd been fighting a losing battle for 2 years, and the casualties were mounting. Our health, our finances, our emotional well-being, our marriage itself, everything was collapsing under the weight of my family's sustained attack. Garrett proposed divorce, not because Head stopped loving me, but because he loved me enough to want me to have a life that wasn't this constant state of siege. You deserve to be free of this, Harper. You deserve to have a relationship with your family, a career that isn't sabotaged at every turn, a future that isn't defined by this war. I can't give you those things. All I can give you by staying is more suffering. We talked through the night, crying and holding each other, and trying to find some alternative that didn't exist. By morning, we'd made the decision that would haunt me for the next 3 years. We'd get divorced, not because we wanted to, but because staying married meant destroying each other in slow motion. The divorce itself was quick and painless from a legal standpoint. We'd been married for less than 2 years, had no children, no significant shared assets beyond some furniture and kitchen appliances. We didn't need lawyers or mediators because we both wanted the same thing: to end the external pressure that was crushing us. Garrett signed the papers with tears running down his face, and I signed them feeling like I was committing murder. 3 weeks later, Garrett moved to San Francisco, where he'd been offered a position at a firm that had never heard of my father or the scandal that had destroyed his reputation here. He left on a Sunday morning, and I helped him load his car, and we stood in the parking lot of our apartment building hugging for what felt like hours because letting go meant acknowledging that we'd lost. When he finally pulled away and drove off, I went back inside and sat in our empty apartment and felt nothing. Just a vast, echoing numbness where my heart used to be. I moved back to my parents' house 2 days later because I couldn't afford the apartment on my own and couldn't bear to stay there alone anyway. My mother threw a small dinner party to celebrate my return, invited some family friends in Braden, acted like I'd been on an extended vacation rather than living through the collapse of my marriage. My father reinstated me to my previous position at work with all the attendant privileges and responsibilities, erased every obstacle Head created over the past 2 years like they'd never existed. Everyone treated the divorce like a success story, like I'd narrowly escaped disaster and was now back on the right path. Nobody acknowledged what it had cost me. Nobody seemed to notice or care that I was a shell of the person I'd been 3 years earlier, that something fundamental had broken inside me that I didn't know how to fix. I went through the motions of my old life, showed up at work and family dinners and social events, said the right things and wore the right clothes and pretended I was fine, but I wasn't fine. I was hollowed out, going through life on autopilot while some essential part of me remained frozen in that parking lot watching Garrett drive away. 3 years after my divorce, I'm standing in the bridal suite at the Plaza Hotel watching Sloane prepare for her wedding to Braden. The irony isn't lost on me that she's marrying the man my mother spent years insisting I should be with, but irony doesn't make the situation any less surreal. Sloane looks radiant in her custom Vera Wang gown, the kind of dress you see in magazines, and my mother is crying happy tears as she adjusts the cathedral-length veil. The wedding has been in planning for 18 months, no expense spared, 300 guests, a reception that will cost more than most people make in a year. My parents are thrilled. Malcolm keeps talking about how this union will benefit both families professionally and personally, and Judith has been unbearable in her excitement about finally having the perfect society wedding she always dreamed of. Meanwhile, I've spent the past 3 months being voluntarily demoted to unpaid wedding coordinator, running errands and managing details while everyone acts like I should be grateful for the privilege of participating in my sister's big day. Sloane has been treating me like a particularly useful servant, sending texts at 2 in the morning about forgotten details I need to handle, calling me away from work to deal with florist emergencies and seating chart disasters. I've picked up her dress from alterations 4 separate times because she kept changing her mind about the hem length. I've addressed 300 hand-calligraphed envelopes because she decided the professional calligrapher wasn't capturing the right aesthetic. I've taste-tested 12 different cake flavors and pretended to care about the difference between ivory and ecru table linens. Through all of it, Nobody has asked me how I'm doing, whether this might be difficult for me, if I need support or space, or anything beyond my continued availability to make Sloane's vision come to life. Braden hovers around the preparations, looking uncomfortable, shooting me occasional glances that I can't quite interpret and don't particularly want to analyze. Has gained weight since I last saw him regularly. Looks older than his 36 years, and there's something in his eyes when he looks at Sloane that doesn't quite match the devotion you'd expect from a groom 2 weeks before his wedding. My mother has been particularly insufferable throughout the wedding planning process, constantly drawing comparisons between this proper wedding and my courthouse disaster. She makes comments about how Sloane always knew how to do things right, how this is what a family wedding should look like, how proud she is to have a daughter who understands the importance of tradition and presentation. Every comment is a small cut, a reminder that I failed where Sloane succeeded, that I chose wrong where she chose right. Yesterday, she actually told me that watching Sloane's wedding preparations had helped her heal from the disappointment and embarrassment it caused 3 years ago, said it like I should be happy to have provided that closure for her. I've developed a practiced smile for these moments, a blank pleasant expression that gives away nothing, while I mentally catalog every slight for future reference. The anger I used to feel has been replaced by something colder and more sustainable. A deep resignation to the fact that this is simply who my family is and who they will always be. Today, in this bridal suite surrounded by bridesmaids I barely know and relatives who've perfected the art of the backhanded compliment, I'm reaching the end of my capacity for gracious silence. Sloane has been particularly demanding, sending me out twice to get coffee made to exact specifications that apparently nobody in this 5-star hotel can master. My mother keeps making these little sighs of contentment and talking about how perfect everything is going to be. Then she turns to me, and I see it coming before she even opens her mouth. Can predict the exact words before she says them because she's been building to this moment for weeks. This is how it's supposed to be done, Harper. This is a real wedding, not some courthouse quickie that you hide from your family. I don't respond, just stand there holding a steamer for Sloane's veil and trying to remember the breathing exercises my therapist taught me. But my mother isn't finished. She walks over to me, puts her hand on my arm in what probably looks like affection to everyone else, and delivers the question I've been dreading. When's your turn, sweetheart? You're 32 now. Don't you think it's time you found someone appropriate and settled down properly? The room goes quiet. Even the bridesmaids stop their champagne-fueled gossip to watch this interaction. Sloane pauses mid-twirl in front of the mirror, her expression carefully neutral but her eyes sharp and attentive. Braden shifts uncomfortably in the doorway where he's been awkwardly hovering despite this being technically off-limits to him before the ceremony. My father, who'd just arrived to check on progress, stops in the entrance looking stern and expectant. They're all waiting for me to say the right thing, to laugh it off or make some self-deprecating comment about being too focused on my career or not having met the right person yet. I can feel the familiar script pressing down on me. 3 years of careful performance, and acceptable responses and swallowed anger rising up in my throat like bile. Something inside me cracks open after being held together by sheer force of will for so long. My therapist warned me about this, about pressure building up until it finds a release point, but I'd convinced myself I was managing it fine. Apparently, I'm not. I set down the steamer very carefully, my hands steady even though my heart is hammering against my ribs. I look at my mother, really look at her, and see her smug satisfaction at having finally cornered me into this conversation in public, where I can't escape or argue. Then I look at Sloane, my baby sister who destroyed my life for a promotion and is about to marry the man our mother chose for me like she's collecting trophies. I look at my father standing there with his expectant expression, waiting for me to fall in line and play my assigned role in their perfect family narrative. and I realize I don't care anymore. I don't care about maintaining appearances or protecting their feelings or being the gracious bigger person. I'm done performing, done pretending, done letting them rewrite history like my marriage never mattered. When I finally speak, my voice is calm and clear and completely devoid of the emotion churning inside me. It already happened, Mom. 3 years ago, I was married to Garrett for almost 2 years before you forced me to divorce him. The silence that follows is absolute and suffocating. Nobody moves, nobody breathes. They're all frozen, staring at me like I've just announced I'm an alien or set the room on fire. My mother's face cycles through several expressions in rapid succession: shock, confusion, anger, calculation. She recovers quickly, her voice sharp when she responds. That wasn't a marriage, Harper. That was a mistake you made before you knew better. We don't discuss that, but I'm not backing down this time, not letting her rewrite what happened into something more palatable. It was absolutely a marriage, Mom. Legal, binding, real. We stood up in front of a judge and made vows. We lived together, built a life together, loved each other. Just because you didn't approve doesn't mean it didn't count. My father steps forward, his boardroom voice coming out. The one that brokers no argument. How dare you bring this up today? This is your sister's wedding day. This is not about you or your past mistakes. The sheer audacity of that statement after everything they did, after they orchestrated the destruction of my marriage and my husband's career and my entire sense of self, makes me laugh. It's not a pleasant sound. My mistake. I repeat, incredulity sharpening my voice. My mistake was trusting my family with the truth. My mistake was believing you'd care more about my happiness than your social standing and business connections. My mistake was not fighting harder when you systematically destroyed the only healthy relationship I've ever had. Sloane finally speaks up, her voice taking on that wounded tone she perfects so well. Harper, you're being dramatic. Nobody forced you to do anything. You made your own choices. The gaslighting is breathtaking in its brazenness. I turn to face her fully, and she actually flinches at whatever expression is on my face. You want to talk about choices, Sloane? Let's talk about your choice to tell Mom and Dad about my marriage after promising you wouldn't. Let's talk about your choice to help them sabotage my relationship so you could take my position at the company. Let's talk about your choice to date and marry Braden knowing full well that Mom spent years trying to set him up with me. Her face flushes bright red, and for a second, she looks like she might cry, but I'm not done yet. You took everything from me. I continue, my voice steady despite the emotions threatening to overwhelm me. My career trajectory, my husband's livelihood, my relationship with my family, my self-respect. You admitted it yourself 2 years ago. You said you were tired of living in my shadow, that you deserved your turn in the spotlight. Well, congratulations, you got it. You got the promotion I earned. You got the wedding Mom always wanted. You got the man they chose for me. And you got to watch me lose everything while you climbed over the wreckage of my life. Braden shifts uncomfortably, and I realize he's hearing some of this for the first time. He looks at Sloane with confusion and something that might be disappointment. Sloane, is this true? Did you tell her parents about the marriage after promising not to? Sloane's eyes dart between us, calculating her response. I did what was best for the family, she finally says, and the complete lack of remorse in her voice is somehow still shocking. Harper was making a terrible mistake. Someone had to intervene. Judith tries to regain control of the situation, her voice rising to the edge of hysteria. Enough! This is ancient history. Harper, you need to stop living in the past and move on with your life. That marriage ended 3 years ago. It's over. Why are you bringing this up now? The question hangs in the air, and I realize everyone actually wants an answer, actually thinks there's some rational explanation that will make this make sense. Malcolm steps closer, his face darkening with anger. "If you continue with this scene, Harper, you'll be removed from this wedding and from this family permanently. You're being selfish and cruel on what should be the happiest day of your sister's life. The threat that used to terrify me now feels empty, meaningless. What family am I being removed from? The one that destroyed my marriage? The one that gaslit me for 3 years about what actually happened? The one where my sister is currently wearing a diamond ring that probably cost more than all the suffering they put me and Garrett through?" I reach up and unclasp the delicate bracelet my mother gave me on my 18th birthday, the one I've worn every day for 14 years, the one that's supposed to represent our family bond and values. I set it carefully on the vanity table next to Sloane's bouquet, and the gesture is more final than any words could be. Keep it for Sloane. She's clearly the daughter you always wanted anyway. The one who follows orders, who makes the right choices, who values family loyalty over personal integrity. My mother gasps like I've physically struck her. "How dare you?" she whispers, but there's uncertainty in her voice now, like she's starting to realize this isn't going the way she planned. "How dare I what?" I ask, surprised by how calm I sound. "Tell the truth? Point out that you destroyed my marriage to protect your social standing? Refuse to keep pretending that what you did was justified or that I've somehow moved past it." Sloane tries one more time to paint herself as the victim, her voice breaking strategically. "Harper, please. I never meant to hurt you. I just wanted a chance to prove myself without always being compared to you. The manipulation is so transparent now that I can't believe I ever fell for it." "You're still lying," I say quietly. "Even now, on your wedding day, you can't be honest about what you did. You saw an opportunity to advance yourself at my expense, and you took it. You weren't some innocent bystander or concerned sister. You were an active participant in ruining my life, and you did it while hugging me and promising to keep my secrets." I walk toward the door, and my father actually moves to block my path. "If you walk out of here, don't come back. Not to family dinners, not to holidays, not to the company. You'll be cutting yourself off from everything." I look up at him, this man who taught me to love architecture and then weaponized that love to destroy my marriage. "I've been cut off from this family for 3 years, Dad. I just didn't realize it until now. You all made your choices when you decided destroying my happiness was worth it to maintain your perfect image. I'm just finally accepting the reality of those choices." I step around him, and he doesn't stop me. Maybe he recognizes that the threat doesn't work anymore, that he's already taken everything he could take and there's nothing left to leverage against me. Braden calls after me as I reach the door. "Harper?" "Wait." I pause but don't turn around. "I didn't know about most of this. I thought you just made a bad decision and moved on. If I'd known what they did to him, to both of you." He trails off, and I hear the unspoken apology in his silence. "It doesn't matter anymore, Braden. Just be careful. Make sure this is what you really want. Make sure you're marrying Sloane because you love her, not because 2 powerful families decided it would be a beneficial arrangement." Then I walk out of that bridal suite and don't look back. Don't wait to hear their responses or see their reactions. I just leave, walking past the confused wedding planner and the photographer setting up equipment and the early guests starting to arrive. I walk out of that hotel and into the afternoon sunshine, and for the first time in 3 years, I feel like I can actually breathe. My phone starts buzzing before I even reach my car, texts and calls coming in rapid succession, but I silence it all. Whatever they want to say, whatever explanations or accusations or demands they're making, I don't care. I'm done listening. I'm done explaining. I'm done with all of it. I drive back to my apartment in a daze, half expecting to feel regret or panic about what I've just done, but the emotion that actually settles over me is relief. Pure, uncomplicated relief. I've spent 3 years carefully managing my relationship with my family, walking on eggshells and swallowing anger and pretending that we'd moved past what they did to me. Today I finally stopped pretending, and the world didn't end. The sky didn't fall. I just told the truth, and then I left. It's that simple and that complicated all at once. When I get home, I sit on my couch in the quiet apartment and let myself fully process what just happened. I blew up my sister's wedding day. I publicly accused my family of destroying my marriage. I walked away from people who have controlled my life for 32 years. By any conventional standard, I behaved terribly. But I don't feel terrible. I feel free. The texts from my mother escalate from confused to angry to manipulative over the course of the evening. She tries every approach she's ever used on me, the guilt trips about family loyalty, the reminders about everything they've done for me, the accusations that I'm being selfish and cruel, the threats about my job and my inheritance and my place in the family structure. Each message is a greatest hit of emotional manipulation, and I read them all with a strange detachment, like I'm studying a language I used to speak but have somehow forgotten. Around midnight, I block all their numbers, just temporarily, I tell myself, just until I figure out what I want to say, but the silence that follows is so peaceful that I'm not sure I'll ever unblock them. For the first time since my divorce, I sleep through the night without waking up at 3 a.m. with anxiety attacks about all the ways I failed to protect my marriage or all the things I should have said or done differently. I just sleep, deeply and dreamlessly, and wake up feeling more rested than I have in years. 2 days later, I do something I've been thinking about for months, but never had the courage to actually follow through on. I search for Garrett online, something I've avoided doing because it felt like picking at a wound that wouldn't heal. I find him easily. He's still in San Francisco, working at a firm that specializes in sustainable urban development, exactly the kind of work he always loved. His LinkedIn profile shows several successful projects, positive recommendations from colleagues, a career that's slowly rebuilding after the disaster my family created. There are photos from a project dedication ceremony where he looks older but genuinely happy, standing with a team in front of a mixed-use development they designed. He's not wearing a wedding ring. I stare at that detail longer than I should, feeling a complicated mixture of hope and guilt and residual grief for what we lost. After 3 days of internal debate, I craft an email that goes through 17 drafts before I find the courage to send it. Hi Garrett, I know it's been 3 years, and I have no right to reach out after everything that happened. I don't expect anything from you or even a response. I just wanted to say I'm sorry for not fighting harder for us. You deserve so much better than what my family did to you, than what I let them do to you. I hope you're happy and thriving in San Francisco. You deserve all the success and peace in the world. I hit send before I can overthink it again, then immediately regret it, and spend the next 48 hours checking my email obsessively for a response that I'm sure won't come. When his reply finally arrives 2 days later, my hands shake so badly I almost delete it by accident. Harper, I never blamed you. What your family did was their choice, not yours. You fought as hard as anyone could have fought under those circumstances. I've thought about reaching out 1,000 times over the past 3 years, but didn't know if you'd want to hear from me. I'm glad you emailed. I hope you've found some peace. I'm doing okay here. The work is good, and the distance from that whole situation has helped me heal. I'm not married, if you were wondering. I dated some people, but nothing serious. It's hard to move on completely when you had something real, even if it ended badly. We start exchanging emails every few days, carefully at first, just sharing updates about work and life and the weather. Then, gradually, more honestly, talking about the aftermath of our divorce and how we each dealt with the grief and anger and regret. Garrett tells me about his therapist, a woman who helped him work through the trauma of having his career destroyed and his reputation demolished. I tell him about finally standing up to my family at Sloane's wedding, and his response makes me cry. "I'm proud of you, Harper. That took more courage than most people will ever have to show. I always knew you were strong enough to break free from them. I'm just sorry it took so long and cost so much." 3 months after my dramatic exit from the wedding, Garrett comes back to the city for a work conference. We meet at a small coffee shop far from downtown, away from anywhere we might run into people from my old life, and the moment I see him walking through the door, I understand that some feelings don't fade just because time passes and circumstances change. We're awkward at first, fumbling through small talk and carefully avoiding eye contact, but then he smiles, really smiles, and it's like no time has passed at all. We talk for 4 hours, long after our coffee gets cold, about everything that happened and everything we've learned since. Garrett tells me he's finally let go of the anger toward my family, not because they deserve forgiveness but because carrying that rage was hurting him more than them. I tell him about quitting my father's firm 2 months ago and taking a position at a small architectural studio that pays half as much but doesn't come with the crushing weight of family expectations. We talk about our divorce and whether we made the right choice, and Garrett is honest in a way that both hurts and heals. "I don't know if we made the right choice, Harper. I just know it was the only choice we could see at the time. We were drowning, and we thought separating was the only way to save ourselves. Maybe it was. Maybe we both needed to break completely before we could start to heal." The conversation eventually turns to the future, and there's a question hanging in the air between us that neither of us quite knows how to ask. Are we doing this again? Can we do this again? Should we even try after everything that fell apart the first time? Garrett addresses it directly because that's who he is, someone who deals with hard truths head-on. "I don't know what this is or what it could be, Harper. I know I never stopped loving you, but I also know that love wasn't enough the first time. Wed need more than love. Wed need boundaries with your family. Wed need absolute honesty with each other. Wed need to be willing to fight for the relationship instead of just letting external forces tear us apart." I nod, thinking about what I want and what I'm capable of giving. I'm not ready to just pick up where we left off. I admit, too much has happened. I'm not the same person I was 3 years ago, and I don't think you are either. But maybe we could start over, not as the people we were but as the people we've become. No secrets this time, no hiding, no trying to please people who don't have our best interests at heart. Garrett reaches across the table and takes my hand, and the simple touch makes my eyes sting with tears I don't let fall. "I'd like that. I'm moving back to the city in 2 months. I found a position here, ironically at a firm that's a direct competitor to your father's company. Part of me took the job just to prove I could succeed here despite what he did to destroy my reputation." We talk about practical things then, about how we'd navigate dating when we're technically still each other's most serious relationship, about whether we should tell people about our history or treat this as a fresh start, about all the logistical questions that feel both incredibly important and completely beside the point. What matters, what I finally understand sitting in this coffee shop with my ex-husband who might become something new, is that I'm choosing this. Not because my family approves or disapproves, not because it fits into anyone's plan for my life, but because this is what I want. This is who I want, and for the first time in my adult life, I'm putting my own happiness first. The next 6 months are a strange process of rebuilding trust and rediscovering each other. Garrett moves back to the city, and we go on actual dates like normal people. None of the secrecy and fear that characterized our first relationship. We're honest about our baggage, about our triggers, about the ways the past still affects us. I tell him about the nightmares I still have sometimes about that day in the conference room when my father destroyed his career, And he tells me about the shame he carried for months afterward, feeling like he'd failed me by not being strong enough to withstand my family's assault. We go to couples therapy even though we're not technically a couple yet. Working through all the trauma and pain and unfinished business from our marriage and divorce. It's hard work, harder than I expected, because you can't just undo 3 years of grief and anger and regret. But it's also hopeful work, each session and each honest conversation building something new from the rubble of what we lost. My family makes several attempts to pull me back into their orbit over those months. My mother shows up at my apartment twice, alternating between tears and fury, demanding that I apologize and come back to the family. My father sends formal letters through his lawyer about my continued employment at his firm before I quit, about my status in various family trusts and holdings, always with the underlying message that I can return to grace if I just admit I was wrong and beg forgiveness. Sloane sends a long email 3 months after her wedding, claiming she wants to repair our relationship but spending most of the message justifying her actions and explaining why she shouldn't be held responsible for my choices. I respond to none of them. Not out of spite or revenge, but because I've finally learned that some relationships are toxic no matter how much history or biology binds you to them. And the healthiest thing you can do is walk away. I don't hate my family. I just don't trust them, don't want to give them access to my life, don't believe they're capable of the kind of honest relationship I need to be healthy and whole. A year after I walked out of Sloane's wedding, Garrett and I are having dinner at his apartment when he brings up something we've been dancing around for months. I've been thinking about us, he starts, and I tense reflexively before reminding myself that we're different now, that communication doesn't have to be a minefield. I know we said we were taking things slow and not rushing into anything serious. But Harper, I need you to know where I stand. I want this to be real. I want us to build a life together, properly this time. I want to wake up next to you and make long-term plans and stop hedging our bets like we're both waiting for the other shoe to drop. I set down my fork and really look at him, this man who loved me enough to let me go, and who's brave enough to risk loving me again despite everything that happened the first time. I want that too, I say, meaning it completely. But I'm scared, Garrett. I'm scared of my family finding new ways to sabotage us. Scared of losing you again. Scared that I'm not strong enough to protect what we're building. He reaches across the table and takes both my hands in his, and his voice is steady and certain when he responds. You're stronger than you think. You walked away from everything familiar and safe to choose your own path. That takes incredible courage. And your family doesn't have power over us anymore because we're not giving them that power. We're not hiding, we're not ashamed, and we're not vulnerable to their threats the way we were before. They already did their worst, and we survived. What else can they possibly take from us? He's right, and I know it in my bones. The worst has already happened. I've already lost my family, my career trajectory, my sense of security. I've already been through the fire and come out the other side scarred but intact. Whatever happens next, I'm choosing it with open eyes and full knowledge of the cost. Okay. I tell him, let's do this. Let's build something real and stop being afraid of what might go wrong. We don't get married again, not right away. There's no rush this time, no need to prove anything or formalize our commitment before we're both ready. We just live our lives together, honestly and openly, building the kind of partnership that can withstand pressure, because it's built on truth rather than secrecy. 2 years after the wedding disaster, I run into Sloane at a professional conference downtown. She's there representing my father's firm, and I'm there with my new company, and we literally almost collide in the hallway between sessions. We stare at each other for a long moment, and I can see her calculating whether to acknowledge me or pretend we're strangers. Finally, she speaks. Harper, you look good. Happy. I nod. not bothering with false pleasantries. I am happy. How are you? She glances around like she's worried someone might be watching this interaction, and I realize she's still living in that world of constant performance and concern about appearances. I'm fine. Married life is good. The company is doing well. Mom and Dad ask about you sometimes. The mention of our parents creates this awkward pause, and I see her struggling with whether to push for reconciliation or maintain her defensive posture. I never apologized, she says finally. For telling them about Garrett. For taking your position. For how everything happened. I convinced myself I was doing the right thing. That I was protecting the family. But I've been thinking about it a lot, especially since my wedding, and I realize I was just protecting myself. I was jealous and opportunistic, and I hurt you badly. I'm sorry. The apology catches me off guard because I'd convinced myself Sloane was incapable of that kind of self-reflection. I study her face, looking for signs of manipulation or ulterior motive, but all I see is genuine discomfort and what might actually be regret. I appreciate you saying that, I tell her honestly, but am not sure what you want me to do with the apology. We can't go back and undo what happened. You made choices that destroyed my marriage and my relationship with our family. Those choices had consequences, and one of those consequences is that I don't trust you anymore and I don't want you in my life. She flinches, but nods like she expected that response. I understand. I just wanted you to know that I know what I did was wrong. I wanted you to know that seeing you walk out of my wedding made me realize what it'd become. Mom and Dad are proud of me, and Braden is a good husband, but I'm not proud of myself. Not when I think about what it cost you. We stand there in that conference center hallway with people streaming past us, two sisters who used to share everything and now share nothing but genetics and painful history. I hope you find a way to be proud of yourself, Sloane. I hope you build a life that makes you happy for the right reasons. But I've learned that I can't heal you or fix you or make you understand what you took from me. That's work you have to do yourself. I walk away before she can respond, and I don't look back to see if she's watching me leave. 3 years after everything fell apart and slowly rebuilt itself into something new, Garrett asks me to marry him again. Not in some dramatic public proposal or romantic recreation of our first engagement, but on a random Tuesday evening while we're cooking dinner in the kitchen of the house we bought together 6 months earlier. He's chopping vegetables for stir-fry, and I'm setting the table. And he just stops and turns to me and says, "Let's get married." Not because we have to prove anything or hide anything, but because I want to stand up in front of people we love and make promises about our future. I want to celebrate what we've built and honor how hard we fought to get here. I start crying immediately, not sad tears but overwhelmed happy tears, because this is exactly what I needed without knowing I needed it. Yes, I tell him, yes, let's do it properly this time. Let's have the wedding we should have had the first time. We get married 4 months later in a small ceremony at a botanical garden with 30 people in attendance. All friends who actually love us and want us to be happy. My family isn't invited, and their absence is noticeable but not painful. I've made my peace with the fact that they won't be part of this chapter of my life. Garrett's parents fly in from Portland. Warm and welcoming people who hug me like I'm already family and tell stories about Garrett's childhood that make everyone laugh. My best friend from college, Lacey, stands up as my maid of honor and gives a toast about resilience and second chances and the courage it takes to choose love even after it's broken your heart. Garrett's brother talks about watching his little brother go through hell and come out stronger. About the importance of finding someone who sees you clearly and loves you anyway. We exchange rings and make promises and kiss while everyone cheers, and it's simple and perfect and completely ours. During the reception, while Garrett is dancing with his mother, and I'm standing with Lacey watching them, my phone buzzes with a text from an unknown number. It's Sloane. I saw the wedding photos on social media. You look beautiful. I'm happy for you, even though I know I have no right to say that. I hope someday you can forgive me, but I understand if you can't. I just wanted you to know that I'm working on being a better person, someone who deserves to call you sister again. I show the text to Garrett later, and he asks what I want to do about it. Nothing right now, I tell him. Maybe someday, I'll be ready to forgive her and rebuild some kind of relationship. But today is about us, about what we've created together. The past doesn't get to intrude on that. Lying in bed that night in the hotel where we're spending our wedding night before leaving for a honeymoon in Portugal, Garrett traces patterns on my arm and asks me if I'm happy. Completely happy. I tell him, and mean it in a way I never could have 3 years ago. Are you? He kisses my forehead and pulls me closer. I'm exactly where I want to be with exactly who I want to be with. Everything we went through to get here was worth it because we learned who we are and what we're capable of surviving. We're not naive kids anymore. We're people who chose each other with full knowledge of how hard it can be and decided we're worth the fight. I think about that conversation later. About the journey from that courthouse wedding to this moment. About everything I lost and everything I gained in the process. I lost my family, or at least the version of my family I thought I had. I lost years of my life to grief and anger and slow healing. I lost the innocent belief that love conquers all and that family always has your best interests at heart. But I gained something more valuable than any of that. I gained myself. I gained the ability to set boundaries and walk away from toxicity even when it's wrapped in the language of love and duty. I gained a partner who sees me as an equal and never asks me to choose between him and my integrity. I gained the knowledge that I can survive the worst thing I can imagine and come out the other side not just intact but actually thriving. Now, lying here in the darkness with my husband's steady breathing beside me and our whole future stretched out ahead of us like an empty canvas, I finally understand what my therapist kept trying to tell me during those dark months after my divorce. Happiness isn't something you find or something other people can give you or take away. It's something you build, deliberately and carefully, by making choices that align with who you actually are rather than who other people want you to be. It's something you protect fiercely, even when that protection means disappointing people you love, even when it means walking away from everything familiar and safe. 3 years ago, when my mother asked about my turn at having the perfect wedding, I told her it had already happened. At the time, I was just trying to hurt her the way she'd hurt me, throwing the secret of my failed marriage in her face like a weapon. But now I realize I was telling a deeper truth than I knew. My turn did already happen, and it was perfect, not because of the ceremony or the dress or the approval of my family, but because it was mine. It was a choice I made freely, with a person who loved me for exactly who I was. And even though it ended badly and broke both of us in ways that took years to heal, it taught me everything I needed to know about what I deserve and what I'm willing to fight for. I don't know if Garrett and I will have kids, or where we'll be in 10 years, or whether I'll ever fully reconcile with my family. I don't know if Sloane will actually do the work to become someone I can trust again, or if my parents will ever understand the damage they caused. But I know that I'm finally living a life that feels authentic and true to who I am. I know that I'm choosing love and happiness and partnership on my own terms, not because someone else approved of my choices, but because these are the choices that make sense for the person I've worked hard to become. And I know that if I had to go through everything again, all the pain and betrayal and loss, to end up here in this moment with this man and this hard-won sense of self, it'd make the same choices all over again. Because the only thing worse than losing everything and having to rebuild from scratch is never building anything real in the first place. The only thing worse than disappointing your family is spending your whole life trying to be someone you're not just to earn their approval. And the only thing worse than a love that breaks your heart is never knowing what it feels like to be truly, deeply, unconditionally loved for exactly who you are. So when people ask me now about when it's my turn to get married, to have the perfect wedding, to live the life everyone expects me to live, I tell them the truth. It already happened. It's happening right now. And it's absolutely perfect, not because it looks the way anyone else thought it should, but because I chose it freely, and it chose me back, and that's the only kind of perfect that actually matters. Before you go, I want to ask you something. Have you ever had to choose between your own happiness and your family's expectations? Have you walked away from people you loved because staying was destroying who you were? Drop your thoughts in the comments below because I'd love to hear your stories and experiences. This kind of family drama is more common than people want to admit, and sometimes just knowing you're not alone makes all the difference. If this story resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss future stories about real people dealing with real family struggles and finding their way to the other side. Share this video with someone who might need to hear that it's okay to choose yourself, that it's okay to set boundaries with family, that it's okay to walk away from relationships that are hurting you even when everyone else thinks you're being selfish. And if you made it all the way to the end of this story, thank you for listening. Thank you for being here. I hope Harper's journey reminded you that you're stronger than you think, that you deserve to be loved for who you actually are, and that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is disappoint the people who want you to be someone you're not. Take care of yourselves, be kind to yourselves, and remember that your happiness matters just as much as anyone else's. Until next time.